Question 1. What is Spring? Answer. Spring is an open-source framework created to address the complexity of enterprise application development. One of the chief advantages of the Spring framework is its layered architecture, which allows you to be selective about which of its components you use while also providing a cohesive framework for J2EE application development. Question 2. What are the advantages of Spring Framework? Answer. The advantages of Spring are as follows. Spring has layered architecture. Use what you need and leave you don't need now. Spring enables POJO programming. There is no behind-the-scene magic here. POJO programming enables continuous integration and testability. Dependency injection and inversion of control simplifies JDBC. Open source and no vendor lock-in. Question 3. What are features of Spring? Answer. Lightweight. Spring is lightweight when it comes to size and transparency. The basic version of Spring Framework is around 1 MB and the processing overhead is also very negligible. Inversion of control (IOC). Loose coupling is achieved in Spring using the technique inversion of control. The objects give their dependencies instead of creating or looking for dependent objects. Aspect-oriented (AOP). Spring supports aspect-oriented programming and enables cohesive development by separating application business logic from system services. Container. Spring contains and manages the life cycle and configuration of application objects. MVC Framework. Spring comes with MVC Web Application Framework built on core Spring functionality. This framework is highly configurable via strategy interfaces and accommodates multiple view technologies like JSP, Velocity, Tiles, iText, and POI, but other frameworks can be easily used instead of Spring MVC Framework. Transaction Management. Spring Framework provides a generic abstraction layer for transaction management, this allowing the developer to add the pluggable transaction managers and making it easy to demarcate transactions without dealing with low-level issues. Spring's transaction support is not tied to J2EE environments and it can be also used in container-less environments. JDBC Exception Handling. The JDBC abstraction layer of the Spring offers a meaningfully exception hierarchy, which simplifies the error handling. Question 4. What is an aspect? Answer. An aspect is the cross-cutting functionality that you are implementing. It is the aspect of your application you are modularizing. An example of an aspect is logging. Logging is something that is required throughout an application. However, because applications tend to be broken down into layers based on functionality, reusing a logging module through inheritance does not make sense. However, you can create a logging aspect and apply it throughout your application using AOP. Question 5. What are the types of dependency injection Spring supports? Answer. Setter injection. Setter-based DI is realized by calling setter methods on your beans after invoking a no-argument constructor or no-argument static factory method to instantiate your bean. Constructor injection. Constructor-based DI is realized by invoking a constructor with a number of arguments, each representing a collaborator. Question 6. What is bean factory? Answer. A bean factory is like a factory class that contains a collection of beans. The bean factory holds bean definitions of multiple beans within itself and then instantiates the bean whenever asked for by clients. Bean factory is able to create associations between collaborating objects as they are instantiated. This removes the burden of configuration from bean itself and the bean's client. Bean factory also takes part in the life cycle of a bean, making calls to custom initialization and destruction methods. Question 7. What is application context? Answer. A bean factory is fine to simple applications, but to take advantage of the full power of the Spring framework, you may want to move up to Spring's more advanced container. The application context. On the surface, an application context is same as a bean factory. Both load bean definitions, wire beans together, and dispense beans upon request, but it also provides a means for resolving text messages, including support for internationalization, a generic way to load file resources, events to beans that are registered as listeners. Question 8. What is the difference between bean factory and application context? Answer. On the surface, an application context is same as a bean factory, but application context offers much more. Application contexts provide a means for resolving text messages, including support for I-18N of those messages. Application contexts provide a generic way to load file resources, such as images. Application contexts can publish events to beans that are registered as listeners. Certain operations on the container container or beans in the container, which have to be handled in a programmatic fashion with a bean factory, can be handled declaratively in an application context. Resource loader support. Spring's resource interface as a flexible generic abstraction for handling low-level resources. An application context itself is a resource loader, hence provides an application with access to deployment-specific resource instances. Message source support. The application context implements message source, an interface used to obtain localized messages, with the actual implementation being pluggable. Question 9. How is a typical Spring implementation look like? Answer. For a typical Spring application we need the following files: an interface that defines the functions, an implementation that contains properties, its setter and getter methods, functions, etc. Spring AOP, aspect-oriented programming, a XML file called Spring configuration file, client program that uses the function. Question 10. What is the typical bean life cycle in Spring Bean Factory container? Answer. Bean life cycle in Spring Bean Factory container is as follows. The Spring container finds the bean's definition from the XML file and instantiates the bean. Using the dependency injection, Spring populates all of the properties as specified in the bean definition. If the bean implements the bean name aware interface, the factory calls setBeanName passing the bean's ID. If the bean implements the bean factory aware interface, the factory calls setBeanFactory passing an instance of itself. If there are any bean post-processors associated with the bean, their post-process before initialization methods will be called. If an init method is specified for the bean, it will be called. Finally, if there are any bean post-processors associated with the bean, their post-process after initialization methods will be called. Question 11. What do you mean by bean wiring? Answer. The act of creating associations between application components, beans, within the Spring container is referred to as bean wiring. Question 12. What do you mean by AutoWiring? Answer. The Spring container is able to auto-wire relationships between collaborating beans. This means that it is possible to automatically let Spring resolve collaborators, other beans, for your bean by inspecting the contents of the bean factory. The auto-wiring functionality has 5 modes: know, by name, by type, constructor, auto-direct. Question 13. What is delegating variable resolver? Answer. Spring provides a custom Java Server Faces variable resolver implementation that extends the standard Java Server Faces managed beans mechanism, which lets you use JSF and Spring together. This variable resolver is called as delegating variable resolver. Question 14. What is the core container module? Answer. This module provides the fundamental functionality of the Spring framework. In this module, Bean Factory is the heart of any Spring-based application. The entire framework was built on the top of this module. This module makes the Spring container. Question 15. What is Application Context Module? Answer. The Application Context Module makes Spring a framework. This module extends the concept of Bean Factory, providing support for internationalization, I-18N messages, application lifecycle events, and validation. This module also supplies many enterprise services such as JNDI access, EJB integration, remoting, and scheduling. It also provides support to other framework.